Dublin, June 16, 1904. A city full of life, noise, and quiet thoughts. The streets are busy with people going about their day, yet each carries their own secret world inside. This is where our story takes place. It is a single day, but within it we will see the whole of human experience. Love, loss, hope, and doubt. Our first character is Stephen Dedalus. He is a young teacher and dreams of becoming an artist. But Stephen is lost. He is struggling to find his place in the world and is haunted by the memory of his mother's death. Next, we meet Leopold Bloom, a Jewish advertising agent. Bloom is a kind and curious man, always observing the world around him. He loves his wife, but he knows that she is unfaithful. Despite this, he continues his day with quiet resilience. Finally, there is Molly Bloom, Leopold's wife. She is a singer, full of passion and life, but also burdened by her own desires and regrets. Her voice, both literally and metaphorically, echoes throughout the story. The themes of this novel are as wide and deep as life itself. Who am I? What is my purpose? How do I connect with others? Through the seemingly ordinary events of one day, these questions will unfold in unexpected ways. And so, the journey begins. Let us walk the streets of Dublin with Stephen, Leopold, and Molly. Their stories are different, but together they weave a tapestry of humanity. Messy, beautiful, and true. Shall we step into the morning and meet Stephen at the seaside tower? The morning sun rises over Dublin Bay, casting a golden glow on the waves. In a round stone tower near the sea, Stephen Dedalus stirs from his restless sleep. The air is cool and damp, and the salty scent of the sea fills the room. Inside, Buck Mulligan, Stephen's roommate, is already awake. Mulligan, loud and full of energy, stands at the top of the tower, shaving with a straight razor. He begins to recite mock prayers in a booming voice, his words dripping with sarcasm. Introibo ad altare Dei, he says, grinning as he mimics the Latin of the Catholic Mass. Stephen, still half asleep, watches Mulligan with quiet irritation. Mulligan's confidence and sharp tongue often make Stephen feel small. Haynes, the third man in the tower, is also awake. An Englishman visiting Dublin to study Irish folklore, Haynes tries to impress the others with his interest in Irish culture, but his questions and comments often feel shallow and condescending. "Do you believe in these Irish superstitions, Stephen?" Haynes asks, his tone curious yet distant. Stephen does not answer. Instead, his mind drifts to his mother. Her death still weighs heavily on him, a guilt he cannot shake. He remembers her final moments, her pleading eyes, and the prayers he refused to say by her bedside. He feels Mulligan's teasing as a sharp jab, reopening the wound. The three men sit down for breakfast, but the tension in the air is palpable. Mulligan jokes about Stephen's moody nature and accuses him of being too serious. Stephen, however, cannot laugh along. The tower, once a place of intellectual companionship, now feels suffocating. As breakfast ends, Mulligan asks Stephen for the key to the tower. Stephen hesitates. He feels like an outsider here, unwelcome in a place he once called home. Mulligan, sensing this, laughs it off. "You're not a real friend, Dedalus," Mulligan says. "Just a bard in exile." Stephen steps outside, the wind from the sea brushing his face. The sky is wide and open, but he feels trapped in his own thoughts. The tower stands behind him, a reminder of his isolation. The setting shifts to a small boys' school in Dublin, where Stephen works as a teacher. The classroom is noisy, filled with the chatter and fidgeting of young boys. The lesson for the day is history, but Stephen struggles to hold the students' attention. "What was the significance of Pyrrhus's victory?" Stephen asks, pointing to a passage in their textbook. A boy raises his hand hesitantly. "It was a win that cost too much, sir?" "Yes," Stephen replies, his voice flat. "A victory that feels like defeat." Stephen's own life feels like a Pyrrhic victory. He has a job, but it does not fulfill him. He has talent, but no clear path forward. He is surrounded by people, yet feels deeply alone. One boy struggles with the lesson, and Stephen feels a brief flicker of compassion. He kneels beside the boy's desk, offering quiet encouragement. For a moment, Stephen sees himself in the child, a young dreamer, full of potential, but unsure of the future. After class, Stephen meets Mr. Deasy, the headmaster, in his office. Deasy is a stern and practical man, focused on order and discipline. He asks Stephen to help publish a letter about cattle diseases, hoping to warn farmers. Stephen listens, but his mind is elsewhere. He feels no connection to Deasy's world of facts and figures. Instead, he thinks about his own future. Teaching feels like a dead end, but leaving it behind seems impossible. As he walks out of the school, the sunlight greets him. The city is alive with noise and movement, but Stephen feels detached, like a ghost moving through the world. Stephen walks along Sandymount Strand, a stretch of beach where the sea meets the land. The tide is out, leaving behind wet sand and scattered debris. The air is heavy with the scent of seaweed, and the cries of seagulls echo overhead. As he walks, Stephen's thoughts begin to wander. The world around him shifts and changes, and so does his mind. He thinks about the nature of reality, how things are always in flux, like the tide. He recalls a line from Aristotle. "In the beginning was the Word." But what does the word mean? Stephen looks at his feet as they sink into the wet sand. Each step leaves a mark, but the water quickly washes it away. He wonders if his life is the same, fleeting and easily erased. Memories flood his mind. He thinks about his childhood, the warmth of his mother's love, and the coldness of her death. He thinks about his time abroad, studying and struggling to find his voice as an artist. His thoughts turn to art and creativity. He wants to write something great, something that will last, but he is afraid of failure, of rejection, of being forgotten. Stephen picks up a small stone from the beach. It feels solid in his hand, a reminder that the physical world is real, even if his thoughts are not. He throws the stone into the water and watches it sink, disappearing beneath the surface. As the morning turns to midday, Stephen continues walking. The sea stretches out before him, vast and endless. His mind is full of questions, but the answers feel far away, like the horizon he cannot reach. The morning sunlight streams through the window of number 7 Eccles Street, where Leopold Bloom lives with his wife Molly. The house is quiet, except for the rustle of Bloom as he moves about. In the kitchen, he prepares breakfast: bread, butter, and a soft-boiled egg. Simple tasks, but his thoughts are far from simple. As he fills the kettle with water, Bloom thinks of Molly. She is still upstairs, resting in bed. Her beauty is undeniable, even in the stillness of morning. But Bloom cannot ignore the tension between them, the quiet distance that has grown over time. He knows she has been seeing another man, Blazes Boylan. The thought of it stings, yet Bloom does not confront her. Instead, he swallows his pain, carrying it silently as he always does. He feeds their cat, watching as it circles his legs, its tail brushing against him. The small creature's simplicity fascinates him. Cats don't worry about love affairs, he thinks with a faint smile. Sitting down to eat, Bloom reads a letter from their daughter, Millie. She writes cheerfully about her work as a photographer's assistant in another town. Her words bring a brief moment of joy, a reminder that life continues beyond the walls of their home. Before leaving the house, Bloom stops to check on Molly. She lies in bed, her dark hair spread across the pillow. He asks if she needs anything, but her reply is brief and indifferent. Bloom knows she is thinking about Boylan, who will visit later that day. As he steps outside, Bloom takes a deep breath of the fresh air. The streets of Dublin await him, full of life and distractions. Yet, even as he walks, Molly's presence lingers in his mind. Bloom's first stop is the post office, where he picks up a letter addressed to Henry Flower. It is a secret correspondence with a woman named Martha, a flirtation that serves as an escape from his troubled marriage. Bloom reads her letter with a mix of curiosity and guilt, then tucks it away. Continuing his day, Bloom visits a pharmacy to buy lotion for Molly. The shop's shelves are filled with powders, tinctures, and perfumes, their scents mingling in the air. Bloom notices the faint flirtation of the young shop assistant and wonders briefly about her life. From the pharmacy, Bloom heads to a funeral for a man named Paddy Dignam. The hearse travels slowly through the streets, passing shops, schools, and busy markets. Inside the carriage, Bloom sits with other mourners, listening to their conversations about life, death, and the everyday details of Dublin life. At the cemetery, Bloom watches as the coffin is lowered into the ground. The ceremony is somber, yet Bloom's mind wanders. He thinks about his own mortality, about the loss of his son Rudy, who died as a baby. The memory is sharp, a pain he carries deep within him. He wonders if Rudy would have been standing here with him today, a grown man instead of a lost child. As the priest sprinkles holy water over the grave, Bloom looks around at the faces of the other mourners. Some are solemn, others distracted. Life, he realizes, continues even in the presence of death. The next stop on Bloom's journey is the bustling office of a Dublin newspaper. The atmosphere is noisy and chaotic, with typewriters clacking and voices overlapping. The air smells of ink and paper, a mix of creation and industry. Bloom is here to place an advertisement for a client, a small but necessary part of his work as an advertising agent. As he waits to speak with the editor, he listens to the lively conversations around him. The journalists discuss politics, literature, and the latest scandals, their words flowing like a stream of consciousness. Bloom is polite and unassuming, a quiet observer in the midst of the chaos. He notices small details, a stain on a man's collar, the rhythm of a worker tapping a pencil against his desk. These tiny observations fill his mind, giving him a sense of connection to the world around him. When it is his turn, Bloom speaks with the editor, Miles Crawford. Crawford is loud and opinionated, his voice commanding attention. Bloom presents his advertisement, but the conversation quickly shifts to larger topics. The men discuss Ireland's future, the power of words, and the role of the press in shaping public opinion. As Bloom leaves the office, he reflects on the energy of the place. The newspaper is a microcosm of Dublin itself, vibrant, messy, and full of contradictions. Bloom feels both a part of it and apart from it, an outsider looking in. The streets of Dublin are alive with movement as Leopold Bloom strolls through the city. His stomach growls, reminding him it is time for lunch. Passing by bakeries, pubs, and cafes, Bloom's thoughts linger on food, not just as nourishment but as a reflection of human nature. He enters a tavern, the smell of roasted meat and warm bread enveloping him. He orders a simple lunch of a gorgonzola sandwich and a glass of burgundy. As he eats, Bloom watches the other patrons. Men huddle over their pints, talking loudly about politics and business. Bloom observes them with quiet detachment, noting their hearty appetites and boisterous manners. Bloom's thoughts wander to Molly again. He imagines her sitting at home, waiting for Boylan. The idea of their impending meeting gnaws at him, but he pushes it aside. Instead, he focuses on his own small pleasures, the taste of the cheese, the warmth of the wine, the rhythm of the city outside. After finishing his meal, Bloom resumes his walk, passing beggars, shopkeepers, and children playing in the streets. He reflects on the cycles of life, how everyone, from the wealthiest merchant to the poorest child, shares the same basic needs and desires. In the National Library, Stephen Dedalus is engaged in a passionate debate about Shakespeare, with a group of friends and literary-minded acquaintances. The room is filled with the smell of old books and the sound of voices, each trying to outshine the others. Stephen presents his bold theory that Shakespeare's plays reflect the playwright's personal life, particularly his troubled relationship with his wife Anne Hathaway. Stephen argues that Hamlet is not just a tragedy about revenge, but also a deeply personal exploration of Shakespeare's own emotions. The men around him respond with skepticism, amusement, and occasional admiration. Stephen thrives on the intellectual challenge, his mind sharp and his words quick. Yet, beneath his confidence lies a lingering doubt. Does he truly believe in his own theories, or is he performing for their approval? As the discussion continues, Stephen feels a growing sense of isolation. Despite his eloquence, he knows that these men, like so many others, see him as a young dreamer, untested and unproven. He wonders if he will ever find his place in the literary world, or if his ideas will fade into obscurity. The narrative shifts to a series of vignettes, following various Dubliners as they move through the city. The scenes are fragmented yet interconnected, like pieces of a puzzle forming a larger picture. A priest walks through the streets, his thoughts heavy with the weight of his duties. A mother shops for groceries, her arms laden with parcels as her children tug at her skirts. A sailor whistles a tune, his steps carefree and jaunty. Among these scenes we catch glimpses of Bloom and Stephen, their paths crossing without their knowledge. Bloom stops to admire a shop window, his reflection merging with the objects on display. Stephen strides past a group of children, their laughter briefly pulling him out of his thoughts. The city itself becomes a character, its streets and people weaving a tapestry of life. Bloom and Stephen, though unaware of each other, are part of this tapestry, their journeys drawing them closer together. Bloom finds himself drawn to a lively bar where music fills the air. The sound of a piano and the voices of two women singing create a mesmerizing atmosphere. The melody is beautiful, yet tinged with sadness, like a siren's song luring sailors to their doom. As Bloom listens, he reflects on the power of music to evoke emotions and memories. He thinks of Molly's singing voice, so full of life and passion. The contrast between this memory and her current infidelity sharpens the ache in his heart. Bloom notices a group of men at a nearby table, their loud laughter and pointed glances making him feel self-conscious. He senses their prejudice against him, both as a Jew and as a quiet, introspective man in a world that values bravado. Bloom remains calm, choosing to observe rather than react. In a public house, Bloom encounters a group of men debating politics and nationalism. One man, a fiery nationalist referred to as the Citizen, challenges Bloom's views, mocking him for his Jewish heritage and his pacifist stance. The atmosphere grows tense as their debate intensifies. Bloom defends his beliefs with quiet dignity, refusing to be drawn into the Citizen's anger. He speaks of love and understanding as the true foundations of progress, but his words are met with ridicule. The confrontation leaves Bloom feeling drained but resolute. He knows he is different, and while this often isolates him, it also gives him a unique perspective on life. On Sandymount Strand, Bloom watches a young woman named Gertie McDowell. She sits on the beach, her dress flowing in the breeze, her movements graceful and deliberate. Gertie is aware of Bloom's gaze and begins to pose subtly, enjoying the attention. For Bloom, this moment is bittersweet. He admires Gertie's beauty and youth, but it also reminds him of his own aging body and his troubled relationship with Molly. As fireworks light up the night sky, Bloom feels both longing and sadness, the fleeting beauty of the moment mirroring the fragility of life. Bloom visits a maternity hospital, where a group of young men, including Stephen, are gathered. The conversation is loud and chaotic, full of jokes and arguments. The atmosphere mirrors the theme of birth and creation, with language shifting in style to reflect different eras of English literature. Bloom and Stephen begin to notice each other, their interactions hinting at the connection that will soon form between them. In the red light district of Dublin, Bloom and Stephen's paths finally converge. The chapter unfolds like a dream, full of surreal and symbolic imagery. Bloom confronts his fears and desires, while Stephen grapples with his guilt and longing for independence. Their meeting is brief but significant, setting the stage for the final part of the novel. Together they navigate the chaotic streets, two wandering souls searching for meaning and connection. It is late at night, and the streets of Dublin are quiet, the city settling into slumber. Leopold Bloom finds Stephen Dedalus outside a cabman's shelter. Stephen, slightly drunk and weary from the chaos of the day, is bruised and dazed after an argument and physical fight earlier in the evening. Bloom, ever the compassionate observer, approaches him with kindness. Inside the shelter they share a modest meal of tea and bread. The air is thick with the smell of damp clothes and tobacco smoke, and the quiet murmur of conversation fills the room. Bloom and Stephen begin to talk, their conversation weaving through topics of life, art, and family. Bloom sees something of himself in Stephen, a young man struggling to find his place in the world. He offers fatherly advice, though Stephen, guarded and independent, listens with a mixture of interest and skepticism. Bloom talks about his own experiences, his joys and losses, and the lessons he has learned. The two men are different in many ways. Bloom, pragmatic and introspective, and Stephen, idealistic and restless. Yet, in this moment, they find common ground. Their conversation is a rare connection in a world that often feels isolating to them both. As the night deepens, Bloom invites Stephen to his home. They walk together through the quiet streets, the city bathed in moonlight. At number 7 Eccles Street, Bloom prepares cocoa for them, the simple ritual offering a sense of comfort and normalcy. In the kitchen, they continue their conversation. Bloom reflects on his day, his marriage, and his hopes for the future. He wonders if Stephen, this young, brilliant but troubled man, could become a sort of surrogate son, filling the void left by his own son Rudy's death. Stephen, however, is restless. Despite Bloom's kindness, he cannot stay. He thanks Bloom and steps out into the night, disappearing into the shadows. Bloom watches him go, a mix of sadness and understanding in his heart. Before going to bed, Bloom checks on Molly, who is still awake. He lies beside her, his thoughts a jumble of emotions, jealousy, love, and acceptance. The day has been long, filled with challenges and moments of quiet beauty. But now it is over. The final chapter takes us into Molly Bloom's mind as she lies awake in bed, her thoughts flowing freely in a stream of consciousness monologue. She reflects on her life with Bloom, their love, their struggles, and the distance that has grown between them. She thinks about her affair with Boylan, not with guilt, but with a sense of practicality and curiosity about her own desires. Molly's thoughts shift to memories of her youth, her career as a singer, and the passion that once defined her relationship with Bloom. She recalls the early days of their love, the moments of joy and connection that brought them together. As the chapter progresses, Molly's tone becomes more tender. She remembers how Bloom proposed to her, how they walked together under the stars, and how she said yes. That yes becomes a symbol of hope, a reminder that love, despite its flaws and challenges, is worth holding on to. Her monologue ends with a cascade of emotions: frustration, longing, and finally acceptance. As she drifts off to sleep, her final thought is a reaffirmation of life and love. And yes, I said yes, I will. Yes. At its core, Ulysses is a story about ordinary people navigating the complexities of life. Set over the course of a single day, it captures the inner lives of its characters with unparalleled depth and humanity. Leopold Bloom is a modern Odysseus, wandering through Dublin streets in search of connection and meaning. His journey is not one of epic battles or mythical creatures, but of small, everyday struggles, jealousy, grief, and the desire for belonging. Stephen Dedalus represents youth and ambition, grappling with questions of identity, creativity, and independence. His intellectual brilliance is both a strength and a barrier, keeping him isolated from others. Molly Bloom, often seen through the eyes of others, is finally given her own voice in the final chapter. Her monologue reveals her as a fully realized character, complex, flawed, and deeply human. The novel's structure, with its parallels to Homer's Odyssey, highlights the heroism in the mundane. Each episode reflects a different aspect of human experience: love, loss, memory, and hope. Joyce's experimental style, with its stream of consciousness and shifting perspectives, challenges readers to see the world in a new way. Ultimately, Ulysses is a celebration of life in all its messy, beautiful complexity. It reminds us that even the smallest moments, a shared meal, a kind word, or a fleeting memory, can carry profound meaning.